something strange is brewing behind those heavy royal gates, and this time it feels way bigger than the usual whispers of a family feud. For years, the world has watched the drama between the Sussexes and the British monarchy like a high-end soap opera. But lately, the tone has shifted from petty disagreements to something much more clinical and much more dangerous. The energy around Buckingham Palace isn't calm right now, and Meghan Markle is suddenly not looking as relaxed as she usually does online. For a long time, it seemed like she was playing her own version of the royal game with smooth statements, perfectly staged photos, and those headline-grabbing interviews. It almost felt like she believed the rules could be bent, that royal tradition was more of a suggestion than a law set in stone. But the monarchy doesn't operate on vibes or public relations. It operates on structured documentation and 1,000 years of precedent. And right now, reports are surfacing that the palace has quietly started a review that could change everything. But was this all a trap? Did the palace and Prince William set a snare for Harry and Meghan, waiting for the moment their narrative would finally trip over the strict requirements of the crown? Some believe the institution let them walk away to California knowing that eventually the paperwork would have to catch up. And if that paperwork doesn't match the reality, the consequences are more than just a PR nightmare. They are existential. The pressure is mounting behind the scenes to remove Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet from the UK's royal line of succession until the Duchess provides absolute proof that she delivered both babies herself. This isn't just about social media narratives or podcast storytelling anymore. This is about structured documentation and traditions that go way beyond modern celebrity culture. The palace has always been a master of the long game. They don't react to headlines, they wait for the archives to settle. And for Meghan, who entered this world like it was a Hollywood set, the realization is likely starting to sink in. You can rewrite a script, but you can't rewrite 1,000 years of constitutional law. Imagine thinking everything is handled only to find out there's a deeper review happening behind closed doors. That kind of pressure hits different. This is the story of how the most famous family in the world might be using their oldest rules to settle their newest score. But that wasn't the whole story. In the world of high-level politics and royalty, silence isn't just an absence of sound. It's a weapon. For years, Buckingham Palace has maintained a policy of never complain, never explain. But in the case of the Sussex children, that silence has become deafening. While the internet erupts with theories about surrogacy, medical inconsistencies, and even AI-generated children, the palace hasn't offered a single word of defense. They haven't issued a statement of support, nor have they moved to shut down the rumors. This has led many to wonder, is the silence a shield? Or is it a calculated move to let the Sussexes hang by their own thread? Royal lineage isn't based on public appearances or how many times a couple is seen at a polo match. It relies on official records, verified details, and processes that have been followed for decades without shortcuts. When Meghan and Harry stepped back from their roles, they perhaps thought they were stepping away from the scrutiny. Instead, they stepped into a legal vacuum. One insider recently suggested that the palace has quietly started reviewing internal materials, press releases, medical confirmations, and baptism details. And this wasn't done for drama. It was about making sure everything lines up the way it's supposed to. If you look back at royal history, the birth of the body is a non-negotiable requirement. It's the reason that historically witnesses were required to be in the room during a royal birth. While that practice has modernized, the underlying legal requirement hasn't changed. The crown must be certain that the children in the line of succession are the biological and legal heirs as defined by the law. By remaining silent while the public asks where the evidence is, the palace is effectively forcing the Sussexes to provide it themselves. It's a passive-aggressive trap of the highest order, and what happened next would shock everyone. The mystery took a massive leap forward when Prince Harry released his memoir Spare. In his attempt to be raw and honest, he may have accidentally handed the institution the very ammunition it needed. Harry described the birth of Archie at the Portland hospital in detail, but medical professionals were quick to point out things that felt impossible. He mentioned Meghan being in a bathtub after receiving not one but 2 epidurals. To anyone who has ever been through that process, that detail raised an immediate red flag. Doctors will never put a patient in a bathtub if they have an epidural because of the risk of infection, the presence of the catheter, and the simple fact that your lower body is paralyzed. Then there was the timeline. Harry claimed they were back at Frogmore Cottage within 2 hours of the birth. For a first-time mother in a high-security environment, that kind of turnaround is almost unheard of. It wasn't just the medical details that felt strange, it was the tone. He wrote about eating Nando's chicken and using the laughing gas while Meghan was in labor. It felt more like a scene from a comedy movie than a documented royal event. And people noticed. They started asking, is this a real memory? Or is it a story constructed to cover a different reality? Contrast this with the births of William and Catherine's children. Every time George, Charlotte, or Louis was born, the couple made a massive effort to show the whole world their new arrival outside the Lindo wing. They followed the protocol because they knew the protocol was what made the children official in the eyes of the public in the state. But with Archie, everything was shrouded in a level of secrecy that felt less like a desire for privacy and more like a tactical maneuver. Silence might be golden, but in the world of royal succession, it's often seen as a confession. The paperwork issues aren't just limited to the hospital stories. Archie's birth record itself has become a point of major contention among royal archivists. The original document filed shortly after his birth on May 6, 2019, reportedly listed the mother under her legal name Rachel Meghan Markle. This is the standard legally required format for any birth certificate in the UK. However, about a month later, something very unusual happened. The document was updated. Her name was replaced with her formal royal title, the Duchess of Sussex. In a system that runs on consistency and tradition, that kind of retroactive change is extremely unusual. Royal records are typically precise from the start with no need for edits later on. When doctors, officials, and clerks sign off on a royal birth, that document is locked in. So, why was there a need for a rewrite? Meghan's team reportedly suggested that palace officials made the change without her approval, painting it like she was caught in the middle of a bureaucratic error. On the other side, there were claims that Meghan herself requested the adjustment to ensure her brand was reflected in the legal archives. But here's the problem. When there's no clear paper trail to settle a discrepancy, that's when questions start getting louder. If everything was handled the standard way, why doesn't it look that way on paper? That question hit hard because in a system where precision matters, even small inconsistencies stand out. And Meghan's strong push for privacy may have made things more complicated than expected. The fewer official witnesses involved, the more the institution now has to double-check everything on its own. It's a classic case of how seeking total control over a narrative can lead to losing control over the facts. And what surfaced next was even more unsettling. If the situation in London was complicated, the arrival of Lilibet in California took the uncertainty to another level. Lilibet was born on June 4, 2021. But unlike previous royal births, the announcement didn't come through traditional channels. There was no UK-based royal medical staff tied to the process, and no familiar institutional confirmations. Instead, the world got a press release from a PR team. The doctor reportedly linked to the birth. Dr. Melissa Drake was a well-respected professional with a thriving practice in Santa Barbara. However, shortly after the birth, and just as online speculation began to intensify, she reportedly sent a notice to her patients that she was closing her practice immediately and stepping away from her career. This kind of sudden departure right in the middle of a high-profile royal event raised eyebrows across the globe. Why would a doctor, at the peak of her career who had just delivered one of the most famous babies in the world, suddenly vanish from public life? Adding to the mystery is the fact that her husband reportedly runs a very prominent fertility clinic. For the group of royal watchers who have long suspected the use of a surrogate, this was the smoking gun. To be clear, there is no verified proof of these claims, but in the vacuum of information, the rumors have become a roar. The palace archives reportedly have no direct way to log Lilibet's birth within the established UK system, because no standard registry or documentation trail was provided to them at the time. There is just a gap where there would normally be confirmation. And in the monarchy, a gap is a risk they simply can't afford to take. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get any more complicated, the issue of Lilibet's christening added a whole new layer of confusion. Royal christenings aren't just family celebrations. They're formal, religious, and legal events with very specific requirements. Traditionally, these ceremonies are conducted under the Church of England, recorded in the official registry, and witnessed by recognized clergy. Those records aren't just symbolic. They play a role in maintaining the lineage and confirming eligibility within the royal structure. However, Lilibet's christening took place privately in Montecito, led by Bishop John Taylor from the Episcopal Church. While the ceremony may have been meaningful to the family, it didn't automatically align with the traditional Anglican process the monarchy follows. Without an official Church of England record palace, archivists reportedly had no direct way to verify the event within the established system. No standard registry, no familiar documentation trail, just another blank space in the ledger. This detail matters more than people think. The monarchy doesn't operate on personal milestones alone. It depends on verifiable records that match long-standing precedent. Prince William is reportedly very aware of this discrepancy. If he was not satisfied with the documentation, or if there were question marks over the DNA or the birth of the body requirement, it could eventually lead to a constitutional crisis. Some say the only way to resolve this would be via an act of parliament and for an institution built on stability that is the ultimate nuclear option. But that wasn't the whole story. Because Harry and Meghan have been so protective of their children's privacy, the few photos that have been released have been scrutinized to an almost obsessive degree. We live in an age of AI and deep fakes, and the public has become incredibly sensitive to visual inconsistencies. Some observers began pointing out how different the children looked from one photo to the next. The timing, the angles, and even the overall appearance seemed to shift in ways that sparked fierce debate online. In one holiday card, Archie appeared noticeably older than expected with features that didn't quite match earlier photos released just months prior. Then there were the images of Lilibet. Some photography experts highlighted inconsistent shadows, subtle texture differences, and variations in focus within the same image. It led to questions about whether the photos were real moments or carefully constructed composites. Even casual viewers started pointing things out. The way Meghan was holding the children in some photos looked stiff, almost as if the interaction didn't flow naturally. In the royal world, photos aren't just for memories or social media. They carry weight. They act as part of the historical record showing continuity and identity over time. These aren't just family snapshots, they're visual documentation. So when there's even a small level of uncertainty around those images, it creates pressure elsewhere. If the visual record feels unclear, then the written and official documentation becomes the only thing that matters. And as we've seen, the written documentation is where the biggest gaps exist. While the palace reviews the legalities, Harry and Meghan are facing a much more immediate threat: the potential collapse of their brand value. Their entire public identity has leaned heavily on the idea that they are not just celebrities, but parents to children who are part of a historic royal line. That connection to the British crown is what turned everyday moments into global headlines and made their personal stories feel bigger than life. But here's the reality: Hollywood doesn't like risk. Streaming companies like Netflix and major partners like Spotify want stability. They want to know that the product they are investing in is exactly what it claims to be. Why would a major platform invest huge budgets into a narrative built on heritage if that same foundation could later be questioned or limited by an act of parliament? If the secret sauce of their royal status starts to feel uncertain on paper, the energy around it changes. Investors and partners tend to look for stability, not open questions. If the palace ever confirms gaps or inconsistencies, the image shifts overnight. Instead of being seen as part of a historic dynasty, the focus leans more toward a high-profile celebrity couple with influence, but without that same untouchable royal edge. And that difference matters more than people think. The prestige that once made everything feel exclusive starts to fade. And with it, the leverage in negotiations. Hollywood doesn't always make big announcements when it pulls back. It just moves differently. Fewer offers quieter conversations and opportunities that slowly start to disappear. While the public focus remains on the polished gates of Buckingham Palace, the real battle is happening in a much less glamorous place: the UK's Home Office and the General Register Office. You see, a royal birth isn't just a medical event, it's a state event. In the United Kingdom, the registration of a royal birth involves layers of government oversight that standard citizens never encounter. For a child to be entered into the official line of succession, the Home Secretary is traditionally notified and the records must be beyond reproach. But with Archie and Liette, the usual paper trail seems to have hit a series of dead ends. Reports suggest that the Home Office has been quietly grappling with how to categorize these records. If a birth occurs outside the UK, as Liette's did, and without the presence of royal medical witnesses, the legal status of that child's place in the succession becomes a gray area. It's not just about being the child of a prince, it's about the legal delivery as defined by centuries-old British law. Some insiders suggest that the government is essentially waiting for a formal challenge before they commit to a definitive stance. This puts Harry and Meghan in a precarious position. Every day that passes without a clear, verified record from the UK authorities is another day the palace can claim their hands are tied by administrative procedures. It's a legal stalemate where the institution has all the time in the world and the Sussexes are running out of it. But there's a historical reason why the palace is being so clinical about this. To understand why the monarchy is so obsessed with proof of delivery, you have to look back to 1688 and one of the biggest scandals in royal history, the warming pan scandal. Back then, rumors spread that Mary of Modena, the wife of King James II, had smuggled a fake baby into the birth chamber in a warming pan to ensure a Catholic heir to the throne. The scandal was so massive that it helped trigger a revolution. Since that day, the monarchy has been terrified of any uncertainty regarding a royal birth. This is why, for hundreds of years, the Home Secretary was literally required to be in the room or next door during a royal birth. While that rule was eventually relaxed, the requirement for absolute verification remained. The palace isn't just being difficult with Meghan. They are following a survival blueprint created in the wake of a revolution. They know that if the lineage is even slightly questionable, the entire foundation of the monarchy could crumble. By choosing to bypass the traditional witnesses and the UK-based medical teams, the Sussexes didn't just choose privacy, they chose to step outside of a protective legal circle that has existed for over 300 years. And once you step out of that circle, getting back in isn't a matter of PR, it's a matter of law. This brings us to the man who many believe is the architect of the current freeze-out Prince William. While King Charles is often seen as a father who wants to reconcile William, is the future king who is focused on the survival of the firm. Sources close to the Prince of Wales suggest his stance is simple. If the rules apply to his children, they must apply to Harry's. William's children were born under the full glare of the traditional protocol. There are signatures from doctors, there are witnessed announcements, and there is a clear, unedited paper trail. For William, allowing any deviation from these rules isn't just a family favor, it's a dangerous precedent. If Archie and Lily are allowed to remain in the line of succession without the standard verifications, it weakens the legitimacy of the entire system. Rumors from within the palace suggest that William has been the strongest voice advocating for a documentation-first approach. He isn't interested in the drama, he's interested in the ledger. By insisting on a strict review of the records, he is essentially placing the burden of proof back on Montecito. It's a brilliant tactical move. If Harry and Meghan provide the proof, the mystery is solved. If they don't, or if they can't, then the institution has a clear, legal reason to move forward without them. At the end of the day, the Sussexes are finding out that Hollywood fame and royal status are two completely different currencies. Fame is built on what people believe. Royalty is built on what the state can prove. As the internal review continues, the world is left watching a high-stakes game of constitutional chess. The palace has the board, the pieces, and the clock. All they have to do is wait for the next move. If you want to stay ahead of this developing story and see the documents that are causing all the tension, make sure to watch our next deep dive right here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell because the truth about the Sussex lineage is only just beginning to surface.